The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the mahogany table as Princess Elena reached for her wineglass. What should have been an intimate family dinner was about to become the most dangerous moment of her life. Standing just 10 feet away, Captain Marcus Bennett noticed something the royal family had missed entirely: the way the guest's hand trembled as he poured the wine, the nervous sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool evening air, and most importantly, the small vial he had just emptied into the princess's glass. In the world of royal protection, split-second decisions can mean the difference between life and death. Tonight, one guard's intuition would either save a princess or destroy his career forever. Because sometimes, the greatest threat comes not from the shadows outside the palace walls, but from someone sitting right at the dinner table. Captain Marcus Bennett had been protecting Princess Elena for 3 years, and in all that time, he had never felt as uneasy as he did on this particular Tuesday evening in March. The private dining room of Kensington Palace was elegantly set for 6 people, with the finest china and silverware gleaming under the warm light of the antique chandelier. Everything appeared perfect, yet something felt terribly wrong. The guest of honor tonight was Dr. Alexander Reeves, a renowned historian who had been researching the royal archives for his upcoming book about the monarchy's role during World War II. The invitation had come directly from Princess Elena herself, who had taken a personal interest in preserving historical accuracy about her great-grandmother's wartime contributions. Dr. Bruce Reeves was accompanied by his research assistant, a quiet young woman named Sarah Mills, and his publisher James Crawford, a well-dressed man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive suit. Marcus stood at his usual position near the doorway, where he could observe the entire room while maintaining a respectful distance from the royal family's private conversation. His training had taught him to notice everything: the way people moved, their facial expressions, their body language, and most importantly, anything that seemed out of place. Tonight, several things were bothering him. Princess Elena looked radiant in her navy blue dress, her blonde hair styled elegantly as she engaged in animated conversation with Dr. Reeves about his research findings. The king and queen were also present, enjoying what appeared to be a relaxed family evening. Prince William, Elena's younger brother, was sharing stories about his recent diplomatic mission to Eastern Europe. The atmosphere should have been warm and comfortable, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Dr. Reeves seemed nervous, far more nervous than someone should be when dining with royalty for the second time. During his first visit to the palace 3 weeks earlier, he had been composed and confident, presenting his research with enthusiasm. Tonight, however, his hands trembled slightly when he reached for his water glass, and he kept glancing at his watch, as if he were expecting something to happen. Sarah Mills, his assistant, barely spoke throughout the first course. She picked at her soup while stealing glances at Princess Elena, but there was something calculating about her observations, rather than the usual awe that visitors experienced in the royal presence. When the princess asked her about her background in historical research, Sarah's answers were rehearsed and vague, but it was James Crawford who concerned Marcus the most. The publisher had insisted on bringing his own bottle of wine as a gift, a 1947 Chateau d'Yquem that he claimed was perfect for celebrating the completion of Dr. Reeves's research. Crawford had been charming throughout the evening, complimenting the palace's decor and sharing amusing stories about the publishing world. However, Marcus noticed that Crawford's eyes never quite met anyone else's directly, and he seemed to be paying unusually close attention to the seating arrangements and the positioning of the serving staff. The conversation flowed from topic to topic as the evening progressed. Dr. Reeves discussed his discoveries about previously unknown documents that revealed Princess Elena's great-grandmother had personally sheltered Jewish families during the war, risking her own safety to protect innocent lives. The revelation delighted the royal family, who were proud to learn of their ancestors' courage. "It's remarkable how history sometimes hides the most beautiful stories," Princess Elena said, her eyes shining with emotion. "These families owed their lives to her bravery, and we never knew." "Indeed, Your Highness, Dr. Correctorau," Reeves replied, though Marcus noticed his voice lacked the enthusiasm it had carried 3 weeks earlier. The documents were hidden in a secret compartment of her writing desk. "We almost missed them entirely." Crawford seized the moment to propose a toast. "This discovery deserves a proper celebration," he announced, reaching for the special bottle he had brought. "Allow me to pour the Chateau d'Yquem. It's from the same year as the documents Dr. Reeves discovered." Marcus watched carefully as Crawford opened the bottle with practiced ease. The publisher's movements were smooth and confident, suggesting familiarity with expensive wines. He poured glasses for everyone at the table, starting with the King and Queen, then Prince William, Dr. Reeves, Sarah, and finally Princess Elena. As Crawford moved around the table, Marcus noticed something that made his pulse quicken. When the publisher reached Princess Elena's place setting, he paused for just a moment longer than necessary. His back was turned to most of the room, blocking the view of what he was doing from everyone except Marcus, who had positioned himself at the perfect angle to observe all the dinner guests. In that brief moment, Marcus saw Crawford's left hand slip into his jacket pocket and withdraw something small, too small and quick for anyone else to notice. The movement was practiced, almost professional, as if Crawford had done this many times before. Whatever he had taken from his pocket disappeared into Princess Elena's wine glass in one fluid motion, dissolved instantly in the golden liquid. Marcus's training kicked in immediately. Years of protective service had taught him to trust his instincts, and every instinct was now screaming that Princess Elena was in immediate danger. But he also knew that making a scene without absolute proof could create an international incident. If he was wrong, if what he thought he saw was simply a trick of the light or his imagination, stopping a dinner party hosted by the royal family could end his career and embarrass the monarchy. The publisher finished pouring the wine and returned to his seat with a satisfied smile. "A toast to Dr. Reeves and his remarkable discoveries," he announced, raising his glass. Everyone at the table lifted their glasses, including Princess Elena, who was reaching for the potentially poisoned wine. Marcus had perhaps 3 seconds to make a decision that would change everything. His mind raced through the possibilities. He could be wrong about what he saw, the substance could be harmless, or Crawford could be planning to harm the Princess of Wales in front of her entire family. The room seemed to move in slow motion as Princess Elena brought the glass closer to her lips. The king was smiling proudly at the toast to historical discovery. The queen was looking lovingly at her daughter. Prince William was already taking a sip from his own glass. Dr. Reeves and Sarah were watching expectantly, though Marcus now noticed that neither of them was drinking from their glasses. Crawford's eyes were fixed on Princess Elena with an intensity that confirmed Marcus's worst fears. This wasn't a celebration or a toast. This was an assassination attempt happening in plain sight, disguised as a moment of joy and discovery. Marcus had trained for this exact scenario countless times, but training exercises never included the complications of royal protocol, diplomatic guests, and the possibility of being completely wrong. As Princess Elena's glass reached her lips, Marcus realized that in the next few seconds, he would either save her life or destroy his own career in the most spectacular way possible. The chandelier continued to cast its dancing shadows across the mahogany table, and the palace's ancient walls held their breath as history balanced on the edge of a wine glass. In the world of royal protection, Marcus Bennett was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are the ones who come bearing gifts and smiling faces, invited through the front door by the very people you've sworn to protect. Time seemed to freeze as Marcus Bennett made his choice. Years of training had prepared him for this exact moment, but nothing could have prepared him for the consequences of what happened next. Without hesitation, he stepped forward from his position near the doorway and spoke in a clear, authoritative voice that cut through the cheerful atmosphere like a blade. "Step away from the princess." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Every person in the room turned to look at him, their faces showing various degrees of surprise, confusion, and shock. Princess Elena paused with her wineglass halfway to her lips, her expression shifting from joy to bewilderment in an instant. "Marcus, what on earth are you doing?" the king demanded, his voice carrying the weight of royal authority and genuine confusion. The friendly family dinner had suddenly transformed into something that felt more like a military operation. Marcus knew he had crossed a line from which there was no return. Royal protocol demanded that security personnel remain invisible unless there was immediate physical danger. Interrupting a private family dinner hosted by the Princess of Wales was unprecedented and potentially career-ending. but his gut told him that Princess Elena's life hung in the balance. "Your Majesty, I believe there may be a threat to Princess Elena's safety," Marcus said, maintaining his professional composure despite the chaos he had just unleashed. "I respectfully request that she not drink from that glass." The silence that followed was deafening. Crawford's face had gone pale, his earlier charm replaced by something that looked suspiciously like fear. Dr. Reeves began to stammer protests, claiming that Marcus's behavior was outrageous and inappropriate. Sarah Mills sat frozen in her chair, her eyes darting between Marcus and the door as if calculating escape routes. Princess Elena set down her wineglass with deliberate care, her royal training helping her maintain composure in an unprecedented situation. "Captain Bennett," she said calmly, though Marcus could detect the uncertainty in her voice, "please explain your concerns." Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would determine not only his future, but potentially the princess's life. "Ma'am, I observed Mr. Crawford add something to your wineglass while he was serving, something from a small container he retrieved from his jacket pocket." The accusation landed like a bombshell. Crawford immediately stood up, his chair scraping against the marble floor with an unpleasant sound that seemed to echo through the suddenly tense room. "This is absolutely ridiculous," he declared, his voice rising with indignation. "I've been a respected publisher for 20 years. How dare this guard accuse me of something so heinous?" But Marcus noticed that Crawford's protest, while loud and dramatic, lacked the genuine outrage that an innocent person would display. Instead, there was something calculated about his response, as if he had prepared for this possibility. "If you have nothing to hide, sir," Marcus said evenly, "then you won't object to having the wine tested for foreign substances." Crawford's face flushed red. "I most certainly will object. This is an insult to my character and my reputation." "Dr. Reeves, surely you can vouch for me?" "Dr. Reeves." Reeves appeared to be in complete shock, his hands trembling more violently now as he looked between Crawford and Marcus. I don't understand what's happening," he stammered. "James has been my publisher for years. This must be some kind of misunderstanding." The Queen had remained silent throughout the exchange, but now she spoke with the quiet authority that had guided the monarchy for decades. "Marcus has served this family faithfully for 3 years, she said slowly. "He would not make such an accusation lightly." She turned to her daughter. "Elena, perhaps it would be best if we have the wine analyzed." Princess Elena nodded, though Marcus could see the conflict in her eyes. She was torn between trusting her longtime protector and the diplomatic nightmare that would ensue if he was wrong. "Very well," she agreed. "We'll have the laboratory test the wine immediately." Crawford's reaction to this announcement was telling. Instead of relief that his innocence would soon be proven, he became agitated and began looking around the room as if searching for an exit. "This is harassment," he declared. "I'm leaving immediately. Doctors Reeves, Sarah, we're going." But Dr. Reeves remained seated, staring at his publisher with growing horror. "James," he said quietly, "why won't you just let them test the wine? If there's nothing wrong with it, this will all be over in an hour." "Because I shouldn't have to prove my innocence to some paranoid security guard," Crawford snapped, but his voice cracked slightly on the words. Marcus stepped closer to the table, his hand moving instinctively toward his radio to call for backup. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to remain here until this matter is resolved." Crawford's mask finally slipped completely. The charming publisher disappeared, replaced by someone cold and desperate. "You have no authority to detain me," he said, his voice now carrying a threatening edge that made everyone in the room step back slightly. It was Sarah Mills who broke the increasingly tense standoff. The quiet research assistant suddenly stood up and spoke in a voice that was much steadier than anyone had heard from her all evening. "He's right," she said, looking directly at Princess Elena, "about the wine. I saw him do it too." The admission hit the room like a physical blow. Dr. Reeves gasped audibly, Crawford's face turned ashen, and the royal family exchanged looks of shock and horror. Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "I've been working undercover for Scotland Yard's anti-terrorism unit for 6 months. We've been investigating Crawford for suspected connections to a radical group that opposes the monarchy. Tonight was supposed to be surveillance, But when I saw him tamper with the wine, she looked at Marcus with something approaching respect. I was reaching for my phone to signal for backup when Captain Bennett intervened. The revelation transformed everything. Crawford was no longer just a dinner guest under suspicion. He was a confirmed threat who had just attempted to poison a member of the royal family. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and horror wash over him. Relief that his instincts had been correct, and horror at how close they had come to catastrophe. Crawford seemed to realize that his cover was blown and his mission had failed. With the desperate energy of a cornered animal, he suddenly lunged toward Princess Elena, perhaps hoping to finish what he had started through physical violence. But Marcus was ready for him. Years of combat training kicked in as Marcus intercepted Crawford's charge. The two men crashed into the elegant sideboard, sending crystal decanters and silver serving pieces crashing to the floor. The sound of breaking glass and struggling bodies filled the ornate dining room as Marcus fought to subdue a man who was clearly willing to die rather than be captured. The king immediately moved to shield his wife and daughter, while Prince William grabbed a heavy candlestick from the table, ready to help Marcus if needed. Dr. Reeves had fallen back in his chair, clearly in shock at discovering that his trusted publisher was actually a terrorist who had been using him to gain access to the royal family. The struggle between Marcus and Crawford was brief but violent. Crawford was desperate and dangerous, but Marcus had superior training and the advantage of surprise. Within 30 seconds, he had Crawford pinned to the floor, the would-be assassin's arms twisted behind his back in a restraint hold that would have done his instructors proud. "Call Scotland Yard," Marcus commanded, breathing heavily from the exertion. "And get a medical team here to analyze that wine immediately." As Sarah Mills pulled out her phone to make the necessary calls, Marcus looked up at Princess Elena, who was standing calmly despite having just witnessed an attempt on her life. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked. Princess Elena met his eyes and smiled with genuine warmth. "Thanks to you, Captain Bennett, I'm perfectly fine." She paused, looking down at the subdued Crawford, and then back at Marcus. "It seems I owe you my life." But even as backup units arrived and Crawford was led away in handcuffs, Marcus knew that this was far from over. The investigation into how a terrorist had managed to infiltrate the royal circle would be extensive and thorough. Questions would be asked about security protocols, background checks, and how someone like Crawford had managed to get so close to the Princess of Wales. More troubling still was the realization that Crawford's plan had been sophisticated and well-researched. He had spent months, perhaps years, establishing himself as a legitimate publisher and building a relationship with Dr. Reeves specifically to gain access to the royal family. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was a carefully orchestrated assassination attempt that had come within seconds of succeeding. As the palace erupted into controlled chaos with investigators, medical personnel, and security teams flooding the dining room, Marcus couldn't help but wonder, if Crawford's plan had been this elaborate and had come this close to success, how many other similar plots might be in motion? And next time, would anyone notice the warning signs in time to stop them? The next 72 hours transformed Kensington Palace into the center of one of the most intensive security investigations in modern British history. Within minutes of Crawford's arrest, teams from Scotland Yard, MI5, and the Palace Protection Unit had cordoned off the dining room and begun processing what was now officially a crime scene. The wine glass that had nearly killed Princess Elena sat in an evidence bag, its contents already on their way to the forensic laboratory for analysis. Marcus Bennett found himself in the unusual position of being both a hero and a witness under scrutiny. While everyone agreed that his intervention had saved the princess's life, the investigation required detailed examination of every moment leading up to his decision to act. He had spent hours being debriefed by investigators, recounting every detail of what he had observed during the dinner party. The laboratory results came back within 12 hours, confirming Marcus's worst fears. The wine had been contaminated with a highly sophisticated poison, a modified form of ricin that would have killed Princess Elena within minutes of consumption. The substance was so advanced that investigators suspected it had been developed by a state-sponsored laboratory, suggesting that Crawford's terrorist connections were far more serious than anyone had initially imagined. Dr. Alexander Reeves sat in a Scotland Yard interview room, still struggling to comprehend how completely he had been manipulated. The historian had been contacted by Crawford's publishing house 18 months earlier, with an offer to publish his research about the royal family's wartime history. What had seemed like a dream opportunity for an academic had actually been an elaborate setup designed to give a terrorist access to the palace. "I reviewed his credentials myself," Dr. Reeves told investigators, his voice heavy with guilt and disbelief. Crawford's publishing house had a 20-year history, dozens of successful books, testimonials from respected authors. How was I supposed to know it was all fake? The investigation revealed the terrifying scope of Crawford's deception. His entire identity as James Crawford had been carefully constructed over several years. The real James Crawford had died in a car accident in Scotland 4 years earlier, and the terrorist had assumed his identity so completely that even Crawford's supposed employees at the publishing house were unaware they were working for an imposter. Sarah Mills, whose real name turned out to be Detective Inspector Sarah Williams, had been working undercover for 6 months as part of a joint investigation between Scotland Yard and MI5. The security services had been tracking unusual financial transactions connected to anti-monarchy extremist groups, and Crawford's name had surfaced during the investigation. "We knew he was planning something," Detective Inspector Williams explained to the Royal Protection Team. "But his operational security was exceptional. We couldn't determine his target or his timeline." When Dr. Stadmanson, Reeves mentioned that Crawford was particularly interested in gaining access to Princess Elena for his book research, we realized we needed someone inside his operation. Williams had applied for the research assistant position using her own carefully constructed false identity, designed to appeal to Crawford's needs while giving her access to his communications and plans. However, even she hadn't realized how close Crawford was to executing his assassination attempt until the evening of the dinner party. "I knew something was wrong when I saw how nervous Crawford was before dinner," she continued. "He had been calm and confident during all our previous meetings, but tonight he was different. When I saw him put something in the princess's wine, I knew we had found his plan." The investigation also revealed why Crawford had chosen that particular evening for his attack. Intelligence analysts discovered that the terrorist organization he worked for had been planning a series of coordinated attacks on European royalty, designed to destabilize monarchies across the continent. Princess Elena's assassination was supposed to be the opening move in a larger campaign of violence. Crawford's interrogation provided crucial intelligence about the broader terrorist network, though he remained defiant even after his capture. "You think this ends with me?" he told investigators. "There are others, and they won't be as gentle as I was planning to be." The threat assessment that emerged from Crawford's debriefing was sobering. The terrorist organization he worked for had been studying royal protection protocols for years, looking for weaknesses and opportunities. Their plan had specifically targeted private family events, recognizing that security was necessarily lighter during intimate gatherings compared to public appearances. Marcus found himself at the center of a comprehensive review of palace security procedures. His quick thinking had prevented a tragedy, but investigators wanted to understand how Crawford had been able to get so close to success. The review examined everything, from background check procedures for guests to the positioning of security personnel during private events. Captain Bennett's intervention was exemplary, concluded Commander Elizabeth Hayes, the senior officer conducting the security review. However, the fact that Crawford was able to tamper with the princess's drink in full view of trained security personnel suggests that our observation protocols need to be enhanced. The psychological profile of Crawford that emerged from the investigation was chilling. Forensic psychologists determined that he was a highly intelligent sociopath who had spent years perfecting his ability to blend into normal society while planning acts of extreme violence. His transformation into a respected publisher hadn't been just a cover identity. It had been a complete psychological reconstruction of his personality. Crawford didn't just pretend to be a publisher, explained Dr. Margaret Foster, the forensic psychologist who evaluated him. For all practical purposes, he became one. He genuinely understood literature, publishing, and academic research. His interactions with Dr. Reeves weren't entirely deceptive. He had actually developed real expertise in the subjects he needed to discuss. This level of preparation made Crawford particularly dangerous because he could pass even intensive scrutiny from people who worked closely with him for extended periods. Dr. Reeves had spent months collaborating with Crawford on research projects, never suspecting that his publisher was actually studying the royal family's schedules and habits. Princess Elena's reaction to learning the full scope of the threat against her was characteristically composed but deeply troubling. During her debriefing with security officials, she expressed concern not just for her own safety, but for the implications of the attack on public confidence in the monarchy's security. "If someone can spend 2 years planning to poison me at a family dinner," she told Commander Hayes, "what does that say about our ability to protect not just the royal family, but the democratic institutions we represent?" The security upgrades that resulted from the investigation were extensive and immediate. New protocols were implemented for background checks on anyone granted access to private royal events, regardless of how they had been vetted previously. Advanced chemical detection equipment was installed in all palace dining areas, and additional undercover security personnel were assigned to blend in with service staff during private functions. Marcus's role in the investigation extended beyond just recounting what he had observed during the dinner party. His detailed knowledge of Crawford's behavior and body language during the evening helped investigators understand how the terrorist had planned to execute his attack and escape detection. This analysis became crucial for developing new training protocols for royal protection officers. Captain Bennett noticed subtle behavioral cues that indicated deception and intent, explained Dr. Tees Foster during a training session for palace security staff. His ability to recognize these signs while maintaining his professional duties may have prevented not just an assassination, but a successful terrorist escape. The broader investigation into Crawford's terrorist network continued for months after his arrest, involving intelligence agencies from multiple countries. The sophistication of his operations suggested state sponsorship, though determining exactly which hostile nation had backed his mission proved challenging. What became clear was that Crawford's attack on Princess Elena represented a new evolution in threats against the British royal family. Traditional security measures, designed to protect against conventional assassins and unstable individuals, had proven inadequate against an enemy who was willing to spend years establishing deep cover and building genuine professional relationships to achieve their goals. The case also highlighted the crucial role that trained observation skills played in personal protection. Marcus's ability to notice Crawford's suspicious behavior, even during what appeared to be a normal social interaction, demonstrated the importance of maintaining vigilance even in seemingly safe environments. As the investigation continued to unfold, one thing became increasingly clear. Crawford's arrest had likely prevented not just Princess Elena's murder, but a wider campaign of violence that could have destabilized monarchies across Europe. The dinner party that should have been a celebration of historical research had instead become the opening battle in a new kind of war against democratic institutions. 6 months after the dinner party that nearly claimed Princess Elena's life, the reverberations from Crawford's assassination attempt continued to reshape royal security protocols across Europe. Marcus Bennett stood in the same dining room where he had made his life-changing decision, but everything about the space felt different now. Advanced surveillance equipment had been discreetly integrated into the palace's historic architecture, and what had once been an intimate family dining space now carried the weight of being a crime scene that had changed history. The trial of the man who had called himself James Crawford had concluded 3 weeks earlier, resulting in a life sentence without the possibility of parole. During the proceedings, additional details about the scope of his terrorist network had emerged, painting a picture of an international conspiracy that had been years in the making. Crawford's organization had been planning simultaneous attacks on royalty in Britain, Sweden, Denmark, and the Netherlands, with the goal of triggering political chaos across democratic Europe. Marcus had testified during the trial, recounting the events of that March evening with the precision that had made his intervention possible. Standing in the witness box, he had faced Crawford directly for the first time since subduing him on the dining room floor. The terrorist had shown no remorse, staring at Marcus with the same calculating coldness that had characterized his entire operation. "Do you believe your actions that evening saved Princess Elena's life?" Crawford's defense attorney had asked during cross-examination, attempting to create doubt about the severity of the threat. "I know they did," Marcus had replied simply, his voice carrying the quiet confidence that had served him well throughout his career in royal protection. The forensic evidence had supported Marcus's certainty. Laboratory analysis revealed that the poison Crawford had used was so potent that even a small sip would have killed Princess Elena within 5 minutes. The substance was traced to a chemical laboratory in Eastern Europe that had been producing assassination tools for terrorist organizations, adding an international dimension to the case that required coordination between multiple intelligence agencies. Dr. Alexander Reeves had struggled deeply with the revelation that his academic work had been exploited as part of a terrorist plot. The historian had voluntarily submitted to extensive psychological evaluation and had cooperated fully with investigators, helping them understand how Crawford had manipulated legitimate academic research to gain access to the royal family. "I keep wondering what I could have done differently," Dr. Reeves had told investigators during one of his many debriefing sessions. "Were there signs I missed? Should I have been more suspicious of his interest in the royal family's private lives?" The investigation had ultimately cleared Dr. Reeves of any wrongdoing, recognizing him as another victim of Crawford's sophisticated deception. However, the experience had profoundly affected the historian's work and his relationship with royal institutions. He had decided to redirect his research toward studying how historical extremist movements had infiltrated legitimate academic and cultural institutions, hoping to help others recognize similar threats. Detective Inspector Sarah Williams had been commended for her undercover work, which had provided crucial intelligence about Crawford's network even before the dinner party incident. Her 6-month investigation had revealed the existence of at least a dozen other operatives working across Europe, leading to a series of coordinated arrests that had dismantled one of the most sophisticated terrorist organizations targeting democratic institutions. The Crawford case represented a new evolution in threats against public figures, Williams explained during a security conference attended by protection specialists from around the world. These weren't traditional assassins or unstable individuals acting alone. This was a state-sponsored operation using sophisticated psychological manipulation and years of deep cover preparation. The broader implications of Crawford's plot had forced a fundamental reassessment of how democratic nations protected their most vulnerable institutions. The fact that a terrorist could spend years building a legitimate professional identity specifically to gain access to his target suggested that traditional security screening procedures were inadequate against this new type of threat. Princess Elena had emerged from the experience with a renewed appreciation for the dedicated professionals who protected her family, but also with a soberness about the realities of public service in an increasingly dangerous world. She had insisted on meeting personally with each member of the security team that had been present during the dinner party, thanking them for their service and discussing how the experience had affected them. "Captain Bennett," she had told Marcus during their private meeting, "your decision to trust your instincts over protocol saved my life, but I also understand that you risked your career to make that choice. How do we ensure that other security professionals feel empowered to act on their training when they observe potential threats?" It was a question that had driven significant changes in royal protection training and protocols. New procedures were implemented that explicitly authorized security personnel to interrupt any situation where they observed potential threats, regardless of diplomatic considerations or social protocol. The lesson from Crawford's attack was that politeness and protocol could literally be deadly when dealing with sophisticated threats. Marcus had been promoted to Chief of Personal Protection for Princess Elena, a recognition of both his exceptional performance during the crisis and his deep understanding of the evolving threats facing the royal family. His new position came with expanded responsibilities, including the development of training protocols for other protection specialists dealing with similar challenges. The psychological impact of the experience on Marcus had been significant, but manageable. Working with palace psychologists, he had processed the stress of making life-or-death decisions under extreme pressure, while also dealing with the aftermath of having been proven correct in his suspicions. The validation of his instincts was gratifying, but the knowledge of how close they had come to tragedy was sobering. "There's always the question of what would have happened if I had been wrong," Marcus confided to his supervisor during one of their regular check-ins. "If Crawford had been innocent and I had disrupted a royal dinner party based on nothing more than a feeling, my career would have been over. But knowing what I know now, I would make the same choice again without hesitation." The Crawford case had also highlighted the importance of diverse perspectives in security operations. Detective Inspector Williams' presence as an undercover operative had provided crucial confirmation of Marcus's observations, demonstrating the value of having multiple trained professionals observing potential threats from different angles. New training programs developed in response to the case emphasized the importance of trusting professional instincts, while also building in safeguards and verification procedures that could support security personnel who needed to make difficult decisions under pressure. The goal was to create an environment where someone like Marcus could act on legitimate concerns without fear of professional retaliation if their suspicions proved unfounded. The international cooperation that had emerged from investigating Crawford's network had led to the establishment of new intelligence-sharing protocols between European nations. The recognition that terrorist organizations were specifically targeting democratic institutions had prompted a coordinated response that went beyond traditional national security concerns. The Crawford plot wasn't just an attack on Princess Elena, explained Commander Hayes during a briefing for European security officials. It was an attack on the stability of democratic institutions across the continent. Our response needs to reflect that reality. A year after the dinner party, Princess Elena hosted another private gathering in the same dining room, this time honoring the security professionals and investigators who had worked on the Crawford case. Marcus stood in his familiar position near the doorway, but now he was accompanied by additional personnel, whose presence reflected the new realities of royal protection. The conversation that evening focused on the positive aspects of the experience, the successful cooperation between different agencies, the prevention of what could have been a continental catastrophe, and the strengthening of security procedures that would protect future generations of public servants. Sometimes, Princess Elena told the assembled group, we learn the most about our strengths when we face our greatest challenges. The Crawford case showed us vulnerabilities we didn't know existed, but it also showed us that we have people like Captain Bennett who are willing to trust their training and act decisively when lives are at stake. As the evening concluded and the guests departed, Marcus remained in the dining room for a few minutes, reflecting on how much had changed since that March evening when everything had seemed normal until it suddenly wasn't. The room looked the same, with its elegant furnishings and historic charm, but the knowledge of what had almost happened there gave it a different significance. The case had taught everyone involved that in the modern world, the greatest threats often came disguised as friends, armed with patience, intelligence, and carefully constructed false identities rather than weapons and dramatic plans. But it had also demonstrated that trained professionals who trusted their instincts and were willing to act decisively could still prevent tragedy, even against the most sophisticated enemies. Looking back at the chair where Crawford had sat while planning Princess Elena's murder, Marcus was reminded that his job wasn't just about protecting one person. It was about protecting the institutions and values that person represented. The dinner party that had almost ended in assassination had instead become a testament to the importance of vigilance, training, and the courage to act when action was needed most. The crystal chandelier cast the same dancing shadows across the mahogany table. But now Marcus knew that those shadows could hide threats as easily as they could create beauty. In the world of royal protection, that knowledge wasn't frightening. It was empowering, because it meant that professionals like him were always watching, always ready to step forward when someone needed to hear those crucial words, "Step away from the princess."